Cam Haynes is a Canadian film industry veteran with over 20 years in the business. He's currently CEO of Union Pictures, a Toronto-based film distribution company. Some of his titles include Down the Road Again, Magic Beyond Words, the J.K. Rowling story, Billy Bishop Goes to War, Donovan's Echo, and House of Branching Love. We caught up with Cam at his office in Toronto. Hi, Cam.
Hey, Robin.
Could you provide a quick history of how you came to be the head of a motion picture distribution company?
I laugh because it was haphazard completely. Between teaching tennis, running a concert, radio disc jockey, television announcer, I settled on eventually running a film festival. And I started out with this idea that Cinefest in Sudbury was this idea that, well, maybe a film festival would fly in the north. And eventually it did. Year one, we expected like 2,000-3,000 people to show up, and I think it was 9,000 people showed up. It was one of the first times ever that a film festival just bolted off the ground. And that's where my interest in Canadian film began. From there, I just kind of wandered through life aimlessly and ended up taking another idea concept called the film circuit to the Toronto Film Festival, where that became embraced and ended up being fairly successful across the country and somewhat around the world. I think when I was finished at the Toronto Film Festival, I spent 10 years there or 12 years there. It was still with this idea about Canadian films and how do we improve them, how do we make them better. I wanted to know more about the process, and so I wanted to get in the middle of it, and that's where I decided that it'd be good to open up a distribution production company.
How is Union Pictures different from other distribution companies in Canada?
I think we're more Canadian focused. Most of the distributors in Canada, the larger ones, have a lot of output deals with American companies or international companies. They service films. Some do buy them outright, but when it comes to the Canadian side, with Robin Cass, who is a producer a long time in Canada, and Sandra Cunningham, who were partners, who were a long time producer in Canada, we all had a Canadian focus. My background was Canadian initiatives at the Toronto Film Festival. Sandra actually programmed for TIFF in the Canadian selection. So we really want to concentrate on Canadian films and see if we can help build a better boat.
How can a smaller distribution company like Union compete with bigger players on the block, like the studios, Paramount, Fox, and even larger Canadian companies like E1?
Well, yeah, and E1 getting bigger. I don't see it really as, we're not competitive in the same fields. I mean, we'd love to have, let's face it, a Harry Potter or a Lord of the Rings or something. I mean, and those are things that we would like to make and produce ourselves. I mean, we are truly looking at, like one really exciting project right now as an example is Ava Lee. It's kind of a female Bond. And so I think we can do those things out of Canada. I think we can do them respectively out of Canada. But it's kind of like starting in Canada and going from there rather than starting in the States and bringing it to Canada. So I think I don't see any competitive problems.
Could you briefly, if possible, take us through the process of picking up the rights for a picture to be released in Canada?
Yeah. Well, they always laugh at me here because I said one day that every picture's a snowflake. But it does hold true that I won't say that it's never the same, but generally speaking, what happens is a script or a project, whether it's a synopsis, is submitted to us, a treatment. We read it, and if we feel that at a treatment level, that there's enough in it that we'd be interested in it, we then ask for a script. The script comes to us, and 20, 30 passes later, we will sign off it and say, you know what, we will go forward with this script. At that point in time, we'll sign a deal memo with the writer, the producer, the director, whoever it is that we're dealing with, for us to move forward with it. And so if it's with the producer, they then start to put a package together for us. Here's the proposed cast, here's the budget, here's how we're going to finance. So it's a long process, can take as little as a year to 3 years. Once that happens and we're at the point where they're ready to go, then we commit our dollars, the financing falls into place, Telefilm comes on board often if it's a Canadian project, and off they go. But it all starts with either a script or a treatment, which we assess for our interest level.
How important are film festivals to your business?
Really depends on the film. I am so split on them in a funny way, coming from founding a film festival to working for one of the largest in the world. For some films, film festivals are important. Those are ones that would garner a lot of public support and or laurels. But if the film doesn't really belong in a film festival, I'm not sure it's the best place for it. Down the Road Again was a film that we felt would not be well served by being in a film festival. The main reason was we wanted to recreate the car driving up with the original cast and everything to an opening that we'd be able to get, CTV, CBC, and everyone out to create some excitement. I felt that if we did it at the film festival and then tried to do it after, what would be the point? We'd get zero after. So in other cases, like, we want the film in to give it the stamp of authenticity that comes with a film festival. You really have to play that depending on the film. So with filmmakers, we often look at them and say, you know what, my feeling is I'd rather it not in the festival, but many filmmakers like to walk the red carpet or the perceived red carpet of a film festival.
See. If you could travel back in time to when you were, say, 19 or 20, and knowing what you know now, what advice would you give yourself?
I think it'd just be to take a deep breath every time anxiety kind of jumps your back. I think at that age I was probably just starting out, hadn't quite hit film, but I had a concert company that was just on the bubble. And you tend to take everything like it's the last thing you're going to do. It's not. So just, take the leap, jump over the cliff, see where you land.
Well, in the same vein, what advice do you have for someone just starting out in this business these days? What would you tell them?
Well, the one thing that I find with younger people I talk to is the more together they sound, the more there's a lot of talkers in film in particular, too many talkers. And my feeling is if you say something, do it. And it shouldn't come out of your mouth unless you're going to do it. Biggest problem in this industry is there's a lot of people that say things that they'll never be able to accomplish. When you sit back after 30 years in this industry, you go, that's not going to happen. I think it's a matter of just be straight up and cautious when you're going in, but make sure that if you say something, you better do it.
Since you do get involved with picking up film rights at the script level, what advice would you give to a screenwriter that would help them see their written work someday on the big screen?
I guess the thing that I'd suggest the most, just from our standpoint, we've, I think, got about 250 projects sent to us this year. We're overwhelmed and inundated. The more you can put behind your package, the more that we're probably going to read it and take it seriously. We generally have a pass on everything, but we're actually looking right now, if it's unsolicited, on how we want to deal with those. So if you've just written something, see if you can get a producer to come on board, see if you can get someone to come on board before you go to a distributor who looks at your package and says, there's nothing here to sustain, a potential film. So yeah, just get as much as you can before you go to a distributor.
What's the most rewarding experience you've had in the film business?
Never, none.
Not one.
No, I would say they came with a positive and a negative. Probably the most overwhelmed I ever was when I was inundated by throngs of people at the very first film festival in Sudbury Cinefest, where they couldn't get into theaters, were lined up for hours, and were very, very pissed off, and feeling, oh my, like what do I do now? And Helga Stephenson came up to me. She said, are you kidding me? This is the biggest success I've ever seen. And I thought, okay, I just won't feel that right now because I'm dealing with a lot of angry people. But those are the sort of things that there's never an outright win. Everything comes with a good and bad. I remember when I presented the building. I was at one point in time charged to write the building, the Toronto International Film Festival's Bell Lightbox building business plan. And I remember at the board meeting when I presented the business plan, and at the end of it, the board turned around and said, they basically signed off on it and said, we're going to go forward with it. I remember thinking, that felt good. Despite the fact that I was the one that wasn't sure we really wanted a building. So never once have I ever said outright win 100%. It's always comes with a, yeah.
So tipping the teeter-totter the other way, what is the worst experience you've had in the business, or one of the worst?
I guess, I can't get into names, but I mean, you end up in positions with filmmakers on the distribution side, and it's only happened once, where they just feel like they deserve more from the distributor than we gave them, and so it just ends up being phone calls from hell, to say the least. I remember some of my days at TIFF where I just would feel coming out of meetings frustrated that your ideas are not actually going to move forward. I remember when we canceled the international division of Film Circuit, that I felt, we'd put about 2 to 3 years into building Canadian films, going to 55 countries around the world, and feeling that, wow, that was a lot of work, a lot of energy that just went away. Understand all of the moves, just kind of, those are bitter tastes.
What advice would you give to a burgeoning distribution company that might help make them more successful?
Don't go in undercapitalized. This is a business where you need a lot of money. You tend to have to put a fairly significant chunk of cash up front, anywhere from, even if it's just $100,000 to $2 million, and you don't get the money back for 2 years, ultimately. So it's something where you need a lot of money up front going in. The other thing is, don't put all your faith in online. Everyone feels that there's this online world that translates to business, and no one has found that yet. No one has. It's a good, helpful assistant, but it does not necessarily drive moviegoers. Most young distribution upstarts believe that an email will deliver them all the audience that they need, and that's definitely not the case.
Could you take us through the lifespan of a film in terms of theatrical release, pay-per-view, broadcast, video, etc.? How does that all sort of work, and what's the timeline on it?
It used to be a simple answer. I'm finding every 3 months, windows are changing, everything's changing. But if we go to something fairly traditional, the film is delivered to us probably 3 months before a theatrical release. We'll have the artwork and everything ready to go. The online will go out about 3 months, and then we go to movie theaters on, if it's January the 1st, it's January the 1st. We hold theaters for 6 months, up to 6 months. Within that period, we can slide to airline and video within the last couple of months. Then from there, it's video for about 3 months till it goes into broadcast, and video includes VOD, iTunes, includes everything but Netflix. Then it goes to broadcast, whether it be free or pay. And then from broadcast, there are some additional ancillaries after broadcast, like Netflix, but it kind of carries on in those other video type windows online to a world that continues. Then you have an additional sales cycle after 18 months. So broadcast window opens 18 months later, we can resell the film to broadcast again. Normally speaking, you'll get through about 2 sales cycles, and then you're getting dribs and drabs, $50 here and $100 there.
Where do you see Canadian filmmaking heading in the coming years?
Again, all of this is, we've gone through a cycle of more commercial Canadian films on the English side that is still kind of holding. I think it was largely because of things like the telefilm incentive of box office. There seems to be more, I think it's going to switch back a little bit more to the auteur-driven Canadian film. We haven't found those new filmmakers yet. We're just not seeing them quite emerge, but I think they will emerge again. I think it's going to be kind of a cyclical thing. But currently and for the next few years, there is going to be the chase for commercially viable films. Interestingly, out of the 250 projects we read this year, I think I would characterize only one or two as being truly art films. The rest being genre-driven, more commercial Canadian films.
Waterloo Region has been called the Silicon Valley of Canada. How has modern technology made an impact on your professional work as a distributor?
Well, I'll give you a funny one. I've been going to Cannes now for about 20 some odd years, and I just got back, and what was interesting to me was, I remember the first year I went, no cell phone, no cards, no nothing. You literally took 3,900 francs, put them in your pocket, and divvied yourself out like 100 francs a day or whatever it was. And you ran out, you were in trouble. Meetings was just, if you hadn't set them up before, you weren't getting them. It was harder to interact with those who would be, the people you're wanting to deal with. Now through email and in online, not only do you know who these companies are, who you want to set up with, because you go online, you go through the website, and you kind of go, interesting, let's set up something with Trust No Disc. So I think just sussing out what's out there. The first years of running a film festival back in 1989 was just, a cloud of material that, where was it? How did you find it? How did you get it? Again, at TIFF, I remember the telex machine sending messages in saying, this film available from China. Now we actually have a great sense of what films are available and out there. So all of that has made it easier. Getting the message out that you have this film is easier. Getting audiences to the theater is, I think, harder than ever. And that's because it's harder to have a water cooler film anymore. A water cooler film is the film that everyone talks about on Monday morning. And we find even around here, because of all of the changing windows, people are seeing films at completely different times. One person saw it last week theatrically, 2 weeks later on video, someone saw it on iTunes, but this is over a 2-month span. So no one's talking about the same film at the same time, which means that getting your word out about your film is disparate. So you don't get that lineup that you used to get, and that's reserved only for really big films.
Is there a person or people that have had a large influence on your career?
Ongoing. I think George Lund, who was the head of MCTV, which became part of CTV, at one point in time I used to tease him that he kind of owned me. I was radio announcer, he owned the radio station. I was on air TV, he owned the TV station, and I had asked him to be the chairman of my new film festival called Cinefest. And he taught me a lot about patience, about being cautious, about, just take your time. Helga Stephenson took me under her wing. She was the head of the Toronto Film Festival at the time, and I was trying to start a film festival in Sudbury, and she kind of just brought me around like I was the real deal when wasn't at all. Those were two people in particular, and I'd say Piers Handling. I worked for Piers for 12 years, and he certainly gave me enough room and ability to get a lot of really great things off the ground and happening. So those three people in particular.
What is your favorite quote or governing principle about the business, or is there one?
I've always lived by what I said earlier, which is if it comes out of your mouth, do it. Especially in this industry where 90% of the people don't. The smoke and mirrors campaigns are just that. But if you say that Megan Fox is in your film, she better be in the film. Because when you come back and it's someone else, you kind of go, not quite the same, is it? So I think that has a lot to do in this industry in particular.
What does the future hold for Cam Haynes? What's next, and where do you see yourself in a decade or so?
The last time I retired, I just remembered I was too poor. I think I want to build this into a viable entity. There's so many things that can be done with a distribution company now, and how it can tie to a production And I don't think we've quite got it right in Canada yet in terms of the films that we've taken to market. And part of it's quality. Part of it is maybe attacking some of the wrong principles. I mean, going head to head with a Harry Potter film when we don't have a Harry Potter production budget is hard. But I think to understand that better, I've had a 20 some odd year history with Canadian film, watching them, seeing them, and trying to digest what's going wrong. When we make approximately 150 to 200 Canadian films a year, and one maybe comes out of that bubble to be something, I think our odds need to be a little better than that. In 20 some years, I've found the bottom bar of Canadian film has come up significantly. The top bar has not moved 1 inch. That's kind of an interesting conundrum to me. Then after that, I don't know, garden. It's like...
What's your favorite film or films?
You know, on any given Sunday, not that that'd be one of them, it would change, but I can always watch Casablanca. There's certain films you get excited when you see them on and you go, oh, that's pretty good. I think lately I've been looking at the last 5 years and going, you know, Dogville I got extremely excited about, the Von Trier. And I just thought Inglourious Bastards, the Tarantino, just was through the roof. Didn't see anything this year that I really was jazzed about at all. But it's really only a couple years. The interesting analogy I have is that we would watch something like 350 films a year when we're at the Toronto Film Festival and try not to miss anything that was important. And there would only be 2 or 3 films each year that you'd go, wow, that was pretty good. Then you'd go about the next 7 percentile, which were all right, and then a 90 percentile that were from god awful to okay. And when you just to prove that theory, all you have to do is go back and look at the classics, and you'll notice it's just 2 or 3 per year for 100 years, and those are the classics. So, you know, I think when you're making a film, much like when you're viewing a film, you got to keep your expectations in line. And I always, from a business standpoint, look at it and go, if this film turns out to be in the 90 percentile, which is going to be hopefully okay, is it still something people want to watch? Is it got something interesting enough that you actually come out of the theater and say, it was okay, but you know, I enjoyed this? Are we going to be lucky enough to be going, you know, into one of those 3 films where it's like, that's really great? I hope so. But, you know, I just wouldn't want to have to put a whole business model around that idea.
And that's a great note to leave it on. Thank you very much, Cam. Cam Haynes is CEO of Union Pictures, and we caught up with Cam at his office in Toronto. Thank you very much.
Thanks, dude.